Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mei Lee Show. I hope you're doing okay. So this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of episode, and that's because I am going to be playing an interview that I actually did back on February 24th. Man, that feels like that was like 10 years ago already, given what's happened since then. Crazy. But I interviewed Adele Lim back then. She's the screenwriter of Crazy Rich Asians and has now just exploded in terms of all the projects that she's working on. So when I talked to her on February 24th, we had so much fun during this interview because we were talking about everything from Crazy Rich Asians and life since and her life growing up in Malaysia and all the different aspects of Hollywood and being Asian American and Asian. And we never got a chance to release the episode because then COVID-19 hit and the world was turned upside down. But I thought to myself, there's no way we're not going to air this episode at some point because it's so good. So I thought to myself, how can I make this relevant? And so I figured out, well, let's get Adele back on to talk to her about what's going on now. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. But first, here is the original interview that I did back on February 24th with Adele Lim. Adele Lim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's so good to have you. Now, listen, we have met before. And when you walked in, I said that, and you're like, I don't remember where. And I'm like, I'll save it for the podcast. So when Crazy Rich Asians was opening a few years back, remember there was a really big effort by Gold Open, right?
Yeah.
Which is an existing movement by Gold House, an organization that really tries to promote Asian films and films that have Asian relevancy and also people who take part, right?
Yeah,
like
they're a great organization, and I think they really were instrumental in giving us that huge opening weekend, which the movie really needed.
They did because it was packed, and so I went. At that time, I was the LA correspondent for CGTN America. So, of course, I was doing a show or a story on the Gold Open that night. It was at Century City AMC.
Do
you remember that
coming
now?
back to me now. Yes. Did we do like an interview sort of like outside in the
The
hallways?
theater.
Yeah.
Yes. So I grabbed you and you were very willing to give me, a few minutes of your time, which was great. But I remember thinking to myself, man, I wish I had more time to talk to Adele about stuff. And I remember thinking, well, someday, maybe I'll have a chance to speak to her and really sit down with her and talk to her about the significance of all of this stuff, but also her background. And here we are.
We're here right now having this conversation. It was prescient.
I know, exactly. So tell me, Adele, I mean, you have been working in Hollywood for a very long time. I mean, people don't realize that you've been cranking it out here as a writer for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I've been a TV writer and producer for 17 years, and I had no real inclination to get into movies, to be honest, because not a lot of people know this, but in television, writers are the bosses. You're the showrunners. You have control over everything. Even if you're some punk staff writer on a television show, you're still producing your episodes. You still speak for the EPs and the showrunner when you're on set. Even on my very first job, I was sent to set in Vancouver and nobody tells you what to do, but suddenly you find yourself being asked questions by like a 200-300 person crew, and you have to be.
I didn't know that. I never knew the writer had that much say.
Not in every situation, and I think things are changing now. But when I was coming up in the industry, that's how it was. And again, ultimately, it's your showrunner boss. You have to answer to, but you're the one on set producing your own episodes. You're writing it, and the sentiment was that, writers just didn't have that kind of control and features. And I grew up in Malaysia, and I didn't, I didn't have the same sort of background with film that a lot of writers over here did.
Right.
All my experience was an amazing, fantastic American television. That's kind of where my heart was.
Right.
So I, very happy, felt very fortunate to get an in over here and to work as long as I did in 1 hour primetime network dramas.
Yeah.
And
the first show being Xeno Warrior Princess,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't get to.
I totally remember that show.
Oh my gosh. I didn't get to write on that show. What happened was after graduation, I came out over here and I was terrible at networking. They when you come out here, a lot of people have the idea, the not incorrect idea that it's really a lot about like who you know and how do you get your in.
Yeah.
And I was terrible at all of that.
I mean, who actually likes networking? I hate networking. Seriously.
And when it's people you like, peers you admire, absolutely. But in the beginning, and especially my personality type, it's hard to, get into a situation and see like, oh, who do I need to know? Who can get me an in? Who do I ask? Like it's a real struggle for me.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, this is going to date me even older.
That's okay.
We lived by Barnes and Noble, and going in and taking the Hollywood Reporter and going into the wanted ads.
Oh, long before internet,
there was
online,
literally a print ad that you get and you respond to. But even at that time, positions for writer's assistant, openings for writer's assistants were rare, and it's a highly competitive job. You couldn't really get it. There was the UTA job list, which was like this sacred document, that every newcomer to town wanted to get their hands on, circulated by the UTA assistants. And, you had to know somebody to know somebody to know somebody to get it. And I did not know those people.
You didn't know anyone. Okay.
Yeah. I get the list and it was like 4 months old. But one day there was an ad in the Hollywood Reporter for a writer's assistant. And I thought, well, great, I'll do that. And I'll apply for it. Who knows? And I did. I met with the showrunner and I got my first
And you got
gig.
the job. I mean, were you shocked that you actually got the job?
I was exceedingly happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of
yes.
course.
I was blown away. Yeah.
Wow. So that was a break. I mean,
Yes,
we
it was
all
a
need
huge
our
break.
breaks in our careers. So that was a huge break.
We all need our breaks. And I have to say that, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for a lot of people, giving me a chance and a shot. And, even though I didn't, go to certain schools or, know certain people or, have the same sort of background they did, they just saw something in me that they thought, you know what?
That's the thing though, Adele. I mean, sometimes it takes a little bit of luck, of course, and timing, but then you have to prove yourself.
Yes.
It's not like you can just get in and then not do anything. They have to see something and then you have to work.
Yes. And I think you brought up a really great point. There is this, this idea, and I think it's less so now, but that the moment you get your first writing job, getting past that assistant bump, the hardest thing is to sort of get your first real paying writing job.
Right.
That after that, everything becomes clear, that the keys of the kingdom get handed to you. Somebody sits you down and tells you like, well, this is how it works. And then you just keep working. And that could not be further from the truth because, there's an issue with retention, especially when it comes to female writers, minority writers, being able to get that first job but not being able to get their second job or their third job, or they stay at the same level for many years. And that's an issue that, the industries and the communities become increasingly aware of. And we've taken steps to sort of help that along.
Well, definitely. I mean, that's been the case like in the last several years, right, of trying to increase the diversity and gender representation, all that. But I have to imagine that back then, there weren't a lot of women, and there certainly weren't a lot of Asian women or Asians in the writing world.
Oh, gosh, there was not one. And yes, there wasn't one. It was hard enough just to find another woman, honestly. I remember my very, very first job on John Doe, the show nobody remembers on Fox, where I think it was there was a writing staff of 10 guys pretty much, and there was one other woman, and she was part of a writing team. And then there was me as the minority staff writer.
Wow.
And, again, I remember having a huge chip on my shoulder about that, strangely, because you'd have these television shows where there would be an effort to increase diversity. And so there would be money for one diversity slot.
Oh, my God.
And I remember thinking, I had a manager at the time, thinking like, oh God, do I want to be a diversity hire? And my manager, God bless him, he sat me down and he was like, listen, a lot of writers get their ins in all kinds of ways. They went to the same schools, they have the same buddies, and you are never going to have that in. So you take your in wherever you get it. And then it's up to you to prove yourself.
You know what? That's good advice, actually.
It was great advice.
Yeah.
I was an idiot. But I think where it came from is from a place that, we all feel we don't want to be given special breaks because we're women or because we're minorities. But the truth of the matter is the way the industry is set up, there is no big Illuminati trying to cut us out. But the way it's set up, people hire people that they are comfortable with, who have the same stories storytelling sensibilities. And more often than not, it's going to be somebody who looks like you or
Yeah.
grew up the same way you
Right,
did.
exactly.
And for me, as a young female Asian who was an immigrant, I just come over when I was 19. I would not have that, that sort of same shared past.
Not the same background, for sure.
Background with anybody who would give me a job.
Right.
So that first job I had, it was a diversity position at Fox. And then after that, I don't think I fell into the diversity slot, but who knows? I'm sure it was a consideration on some staffs I've been on.
Probably was, yeah, to a certain extent, maybe.
To a certain extent, absolutely. But and even that, I remember, taking issue with that, of feeling that I cannot be viewed as, the special concession hire, that I need to come on and prove my worth. If that means working harder, pitching more stories, showing that, I, beyond
you got the goods.
Beyond having a vagina and being, being an Asian, there's more to me.
It's so true though, because we all feel like we don't want to be a quota.
Yes.
We don't want to just be seen as a quota.
100%.
We want to be hired because we're good.
Yeah.
And, they want our skills.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in our positions as both women and minorities, sometimes we have to we're sometimes a little hypersensitive to that, because we don't know why they're looking at us.
And so I think, and you can't let that mess with your head. I think the idea is, with the advice of my former manager of, going in, take whatever in you can get, but understand that that's not going to get you the whole way there. Yeah. That the second you walk through the door, it's completely on you.
Right. So what was that like though, initially? I mean, you said, you had a chip on your shoulder because you were this person who was, perceived as the minority hire, right? So what was that like working with that group? I mean, did they look at you differently and treat you differently, or were they more accepting?
Well, I would say, it's the same with Asians, it's the same with everybody else. Everybody's different. And so I have to say on that staff, I've made friends that I'm still, I'm still close to, or at least I'm still in contact with and think fondly of to this day. There were writers there who were incredibly gracious and welcoming, and I didn't know anything. Who took me under their wing and really sort of, taught me how to be in the room, taught me what to do on set.
And these were all men, right?
Yes, they're mostly
which
dudes.
Goes to show, and I still say this to this day, is that there still is gender disparity, right? I mean, there's still a gap, right? So therefore, it's not just women who have to band together. It's the men who actually have to support our efforts.
That is exactly right. It's funny. You brought up a point that I've been thinking a lot, in the last year, that we're all in this together,
Absolutely.
And we're all allies for each other.
Yeah.
Whether it's not just about, the women have to band together or the people of color have to band together.
Right.
We're all looking out for each other.
That's
and
right.
really it goes nowhere, without the support of everyone.
Yeah.
Because, there are enough bad guys out there.
Growing ever by the day.
And a big part of it is because the silent majority allows them to get away with it, and whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's inappropriate behavior, in the industry, outside of the industry.
Yeah. Well, that's why we had the Me Too movement, and and that continues to this day.
Yeah.
Okay, I definitely have so much to talk to you about, but let's go back a little bit because I'm curious, and I've done some research on you, but so you had a love of writing even when you were younger.
Yes.
There was something about writing for you that was an expression of yourself and the creativity that you wanted to express. So did you always think that you were going to make a career out of writing? Even when you were, in Malaysia growing up, because listen, as Asians, as we all know, right, we tend to want to go sort of into safer industries and backgrounds. At least our parents want us to. Yeah. So I'm curious as to how that happened for you.
Oh my gosh. I think it's only in the last 5 or 10 years that my mother finally has made peace with the fact I didn't go to London School of Economics,
Typical though.
And go into finance. So I think in many ways, I've been very lucky. I've wanted to write ever since I could write. I remember, it's just like putting it's weird. Maybe it's a false memory. I feel I can remember putting all these sentences together and, in one of those like old copybooks with like a place for drawings and a place for lines. And I'm just like writing this whole story about this girl and this intense relationship she had with an ant. And I think I just always knew because I loved books so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you obviously wanted to tell stories then.
Yes. Yes. Always wanted to tell stories. Always knew it was going to be nonfiction.
Okay.
And my parents, God bless them. I think they were far more indulgent than most Asian parents, most Chinese parents in Malaysia. They saw that I wanted to do it, had always pursued it. I'd, write plays for every class I'd, been in. And they both worked in advertising. And so in their minds, they thought, well, this is a way you could make a living and be a writer. You could be a copywriter. One day you could be a creative director.
So they were at least in an industry that was somewhat creative, not like medicine, science, or, things like that. Yeah,
exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were not in the sexy part of it. My mother was both of them were in media, but they'd worked enough with creative executives and saw that, well, you could have a career doing this. Right. And I thought, well, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I joke about this, but I always thought my life would be, being an unsuccessful novelist, living in squalor, surrounded by dogs, and writing books that nobody would read. But I would be happy, and I'd have my creative integrity. You think all kinds of stupid things when you're younger.
Well, but at least then, you even thinking that, you knew that this is still what you wanted to pursue. 100%. So that was clearly a passion.
Yes.
Right. It was coming from deep inside.
Yes. Yeah. And I got a job when I was a teenager writing for a national Malaysian paper where it was, just opinion pieces. And I just write about my silly life and my friends and my family. Yeah. And that was the first professional writing gig I ever got. But I remember thinking, this is absolutely something I want to pursue.
Yeah. Okay. So then you go to college and you come to the U.S. That's why you first came to the U.S. when you were 19.
Yes.
Right. And you go to college, you meet somebody.
I do. You did your research.
I know. I do my research. That's why I'm a journalist. But you met somebody.
I met somebody.
Because you thought you were going to go back to Malaysia, right?
100%. Because my whole family was there. I always thought I would be, it sounds like young, idealistic, pride, but Malaysia is one of those great and amazing countries. We're so diverse. We have, we have, the generation and my classmates who I grew up with, we had such great dreams and plans. And I always thought I would go back and, sort of be part of the transformation of Malaysia from a third world country to a first world country. Yeah. And what had happened was after I graduated, it was like, I think in 96, there was this huge Southeast Asian recession and everything crashed.
Yep. I remember that. I was there actually.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I was working for CNN at the time.
Oh, yeah. So you were there with like the crash of the paper tigers, all of
everything,
all of that.
It was a mess.
Yeah. And so meanwhile, I had met a cute boy in college.
There you go. That changes everything.
Like a cute white boy from Boston, and and he was so different from other people I met. And he would talk. He'd tell me all about like American politics, and he told me about Nixon. I mean, it was like a whole thing.
He was smart.
He was so smart, and
which is so sexy.
It's so sexy when again, you're new to the country, and the whole world is like amazing and fantastic and new. And just to bring it up briefly, I grew up. I went to public Malaysian schools, and that's based after the British system. Yep. And it's incredibly stifling. It's just like spiritually, intellectually stifling. Like they do not care what you think. Yeah. It really is about absorbing a huge amount of information.
It's like Singapore
computer.
too.
Yes, that's exactly. It's the same. It's the same system, and you're supposed to regurgitate all this. Information.
It's all memorization, and
exactly. And that becomes its own game. And in the American system. And just from an outsider's perspective, it was this amazing ray of sunshine you did not know existed. When in the American, I went through this transfer program where I spent a year or two in Malaysia, which was great because I would not have been prepared if I had just had my ass like shipped directly here after secondary school.
Got it.
Which is all these essays where you're supposed to talk about your own opinion on historical events. And for me and all my classmates, it was this feeling of like, what do you mean our opinion? Who cares about our opinion? My opinion? Our opinion counts for exactly nothing. Wow. But it was that whole, it is that very American attitude that everybody has an opinion that matters. And
you should express it.
You should express it and you can enact change. I mean, it was a very new, liberating concept. Wow. And I fell in love with America. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't think I had get that growing up. Necessarily, a lot of our authors were British. You know, the sensibilities were British. But I think going into the American program, reading Emerson for the first time, it was just, it was mind blowing.
Isn't that interesting?
And so into that mix, you meet, you know, the cute white boy from Boston who's telling you all about like, you know, American politics.
He wasn't like your tutor, was he?
No.
He
was just like a year older.
Young teacher, right? Okay. Okay, so you meet this guy.
I meet this guy.
And so your plans obviously shifted. You're like, I'm not going back to Malaysia. I'm going to hang out with this guy.
Yes. Well, I tried to go back to Malaysia. You know, the opportunity wasn't there. And my parents
How did they feel about you meeting a white boy?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna unpack that, but they did not like any of it. And I will say, in their defense, it wasn't just like racism. It was this feeling that we're gonna lose our daughter, and you know,
is understandable.
Yes, and I think my mother kept being encouraging and saying, "No, come back. You know, you can find work. You can work for Christian programming." Family's like big time born again Christians.
Yep.
And I think she might have bought me a Volkswagen, which was my dream car at the time.
Oh, she was bribing you.
Yes. I love you, Mom.
That's great.
You know, and this whole thing of like, I could still go back. But I remember feeling, you know, so the guy I met and who I started going out with, his plans after graduation was to drive out to LA and try to work in TV. And again, naive, uninformed, I did not know that was an option one had in life. Even though I'd gone to school for television, you know, abstractly I knew you could do that.
Okay. But you didn't think about LA as the place, the capital of television and Hollywood and
I thought again abstractly. I just thought I'd get my degree and go work in advertising, you know. But I think I think
so you still have put yourself in the box.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. And I think all it took was one creative pitch, because I would freelance for my mother's company. I don't think people even knew I was her daughter, but I would do these creative pitches when I was on break from school.
Yeah.
And I remember doing this pitch for baby formula. And I don't know if you know this about Asian moms in Asia, they like fat babies. And
they
so
do.
They do.
Because they're healthy. That means, and they're also means they're wealthy and, you know, doing well. And yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
And so the whole angle on the baby formula thing was just like, you know, basically, you know,
you're going to have a fat baby.
Buy our formula. You're going to have the fattest baby in town. It's going to be great. I remember pitching this thinking, what am I doing with my life? This can't be it. So when my boyfriend said, you know what, I'm going to drive to LA, try to work in TV, I was like, let's go. Let's do this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that was, I think, when did you go out? In 2000? Or was that before? I'm trying to look at my notes here.
I think 97 or
okay,
98.
Late 90s.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. All right. So are you still with this same person?
We got married.
Oh,
you
did?
We did. We had kids, but we're divorced now.
Oh,
it's so sad. Well,
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Is it all good?
It's all good.
Okay.
He was, yes. I have zero regrets about it.
Okay. So it wasn't just like a flash in the pan. You guys actually got married and had children.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So obviously you're out here, and then that's when your story began.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have him to thank for like
100%. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be in LA, and
you would have never, right?
No, I wouldn't have the career I do today.
And you would have probably been back in Malaysia.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think so. Or even if I had made it out here, I think that the biggest thing was this, which is, you know, when you come out here and you're trying to break in as a writer, you need all these samples.
Yeah.
And the biggest drawback as an immigrant is that, you know, again, I don't have all those shared cultural touch points that everybody else has.
Right.
So when you're writing, and again, you know, television wasn't as diverse as it is now. So they're not looking for stories about other people. In fact, the more other you seem, the less of a chance, you know, you're going to be given to succeed. So when I think my first few specs were an Ally McBeal and a Sex in the City. And again, they're very sort of like insider point of view stories.
Okay.
So I think really, you know, having, you know, being in a relationship with somebody who was so, you know, deeply entrenched in like American pop culture really, really helped.
It helped you integrate a little bit
100%.
Faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Assimilate. That's cool though. So it was very purposeful in the way it happened. And
yes.
I like the fact that it happened so organically in that way.
Yeah. And also, you know, it takes a certain amount. You need support. And it's very lonely coming out here, especially if you don't have the support of your family and you don't have a community over here. And also, you know, the way it is in Asia. It's like, it's all about your community.
Yes.
And I think, coming out here, having somebody that makes a huge difference.
Oh, I would think it would make a huge difference for sure. And did he go on to work in television as well?
So he was, he started out with that plan. And I think he became like a coordinator or something at William Morris for a bit. And I remember he came home one night saying he was playing poker at the downtown casino. And I remember him coming home one night saying, "Hey, babe, I made more money tonight than I did all month. I think this is going to be my new thing." He's a professional poker player.
No, shut up.
Yes.
No
yes.
way.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And he's obviously doing okay by doing that?
He's doing fine. He's doing great.
That's amazing.
But here's the thing. It's so funny because, you grow up thinking like, oh, this will never be me. My father was a huge gambler, like enormous gambler. I love, my father was the best. He was like a bigger than life character.
Okay.
But there were instances when I was very young where, we had to move houses and because of an incident. Yes.
Wow.
But
so you're like, oh my God, I married my father.
Pretty much. Like I remember thinking like, oh, my mother's a fool. Like why, you would never do this. Yeah. And when I met, my boyfriend at the time, he couldn't shuffle a deck of cards. And I think my mother taught him mahjong. I might have taught him gin rummy. Who knows? Maybe it's something in my blood that really turns the men in my life into massive gamblers.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay. So here you are, you're starting to get these different writing jobs, and then years pass and you have this stellar resume now, and John M. Chu calls you because you guys had worked together in the past. John M. Chu being the director of Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes.
And he says, I want you to read this book.
Yes.
Right? Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes.
And then tell me what happened.
Yeah, so we had sold a pilot together for Fox, and it didn't get picked up to series. I'm still heartbroken about it. It was about dancers. And but we had a great experience working together. So he contacted me. I was already working on another show, and he said, "Please read this book." And it was Crazy Rich Asians, and it's a book that my family had been trying to get me to read for a while.
Oh, isn't that funny?
And I was busy, and I remember thinking like, it's called Crazy Rich Asians. It's so sensational. I don't know.
Right.
But the second I started reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not just Asians. It's about like the Chinese, Malaysian, Singaporeans. Like it's the culture I grew up in.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, like getting back to John saying like, absolutely
I'm in
100%.
Wow.
I already had I already was, working on a show, but the feeling was I had never, in the whole 16, 17 years I've been a TV writer, never had a chance to write for anybody who looked remotely like me. And the thought that they would have come from my culture was unthinkable.
Unthinkable.
It never even occurred to me.
Right.
And so the idea that there is this project out there, with people with my culture, and they spoke Malay and Hokkien and Cantonese and all the foods and all the cultural touch points were there.
And modern day.
And
not like some historic, time frame
exactly
of like stereotypes and all of that, but modern day story.
Modern day. And, this is what I love about Kevin Kwan, the author of the book, which is when he talks about writing the book, he had a little post-it on his computer saying, joy, that, he was writing from a place of joy. And that's exactly the kind of attitude I, had been putting towards my own work, because it's really easy in this industry to kind of get weighed down by the negativity.
Of course, and become jaded.
You become jaded, or you think of your work purely in terms of being, this like financial asset almost, of like, you have to, what do I, are the stories I'm going to pitch, are they going to be something I can sell? Are there something that the marketplace wants? And to me, at least just personally, that's just the wrong place to be coming from for a story. So reading his book, again, it was so joyful.
Yeah.
And there are amazing Asian American authors out there telling a lot of important stories.
Yep, absolutely.
And, and they need to be told. The issue is sometimes that it comes from a really heavy place, and not everybody is ready for that.
Yeah, that's true, because it's a lot of wartime, immigrants and the suffering. And
the suffering.
Those stories need to be told, but I totally get what you mean. A lot of the books out there that have been written they're pretty dark and like, I mean, they're serious.
They're serious.
stories.
And again, they need to be told, but I think all our stories need to be told.
Absolutely.
The heavier stories about struggle and your journey do need to be told, but also the lighter side of it, because it's important. And again, having grown up in a different culture and coming over here, and it's been a gradual realization for me of seeing how mainstream America views Asian Americans.
Yes.
And this is not something they tell you when you first get to this country, but realizing like, oh, the whole country isn't like, your little student enclave in Boston or, the diverse neighborhoods in LA. You can be viewed very much as an other because of the way we're depicted in the media.
Yes.
That if we're always depicted one way, even if you're depicted as a model minority, it affects the way, the larger America sees you, that you're still very much an other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so with Kevin's book, the feeling was, oh gosh, this shows like the lighter, funnier side of us.
Yeah.
And the book had already had traction in book clubs and it had a great reception in America. So, I think it just really sort of opened up doors and paved the way for this project.
Yeah. So you jumped right in. There was like no question in your mind.
No question in my mind. And I remember thinking like, if I don't do this, somebody else who doesn't know my culture, is going to do this.
Important. That was very important.
It was
I think
important.
that's why, because you were a co-writer for the movie, it's why it had a level of authenticity.
I would hope so.
No,
Yes,
seriously.
yes.
I mean, look, I lived in Singapore for 6.5 years. So I know Singapore really well. And so when I read the book, I'm like, I know who these people are. I literally was like, I know who Kevin is writing about in this book right now. And I mean, I've been to parties and weddings that are exactly like what's depicted in the book and the movie. And when people would ask me, that can't be real, I'm like, oh no, honey, it's real. This is what happens over there.
Yes. And it is, sort of broad and heightened, but exactly all the references, they are all kind of stories within the community that my parents knew about. They're like, oh, this woman who got paid off by this rich family, like that's all for reals.
It's for real.
Yeah. And when you talk about authenticity, it's that which is, any writer can get into a world and do the deep research and really sort of like try to live in the skin of someone else. And with this, I can't it's hard to put into words even, and I know I'm a writer, it's ironic, but my whole career had been writing for another point of view. And I think, and I met another writer who, was sympathetic to that and said, you know what, as an outsider, strangely, you might have even a better perspective on it because you're really sort of observing all this behavior new.
Yeah.
But I'd never really gotten a chance to write for characters that, spoke the way I knew people spoke growing up.
Right.
So even though my family was not crazy rich, all the aunties in there, the thing with the scene with the Bible classes, my mother is in those Bible classes. I've been in those where, you're reading scripture, but they're really talking about real estate tips and trying to get their children married off and trying to get their children's lives fixed.
That's the real deal. And the mahjong scene, apparently, that was you writing that scene between Constance Wu and Michelle Yeoh, right?
Yes, yeah.
Which was very authentic.
Yeah, and I think, and John was a huge part of it too, because the book is amazing, but a lot of the book happens, in exposition of one character explaining the world and the dynamics and all the craziness to another character, and you can't do that in a movie or TV. You have to put the drama on its feet. You have to dramatize all of that.
Yep.
And so a big thing, where the book climaxes is the scene between Rachel and Eleanor, and how do you put that on its feet? How do you make that, visually interesting?
Yeah.
And so we sort of leaned into this background with Rachel and, game theory and economics and feeling like an outsider. And we built up the character of Eleanor. It's so easy with a property like Crazy Rich Asians for it to be, heightened and things. And I remember feeling when I was writing it, I didn't want Americans watching this laughing at the people in it, laughing at the characters as the other, like they're, some rich, exotic
like
circus
over there,
sideshow over there that, I wanted them to be laughing with the characters and feeling with the characters. And that's a key difference.
Yeah.
And for her, so it could not be about money. It couldn't just be about class. That at the end of the day, it had to be the story of a woman who is terrified of losing her son. And that is a story I was familiar with. It's a story that all
Everyone can relate to.
everyone can relate
Yeah.
to, and it's really, one of those resonant recurring things in like Asian storytelling. If
Yeah.
you look at a lot of our soap operas and, because
Totally.
it's real.
It's so real. Yeah.
It's so real. Asian women and their sons, like Jewish moms and their sons, I guess.
I know. I have an older brother, and I'm the second child, and of course my brother has always been the golden child, and I've always tried.
We should talk about in a bit. Yes, that was the whole thing. I feel
Yeah.
like that was a big reason I came to America also because I think we grew up. We grew up in that last generation of where being a boy really held a lot of
Yep.
cachet.
That's right.
And if you grow up as a girl in those families, like again, chip on the shoulder.
Yep.
So anyway. Getting back to the mahjong scene,
yeah.
we talked about how would we set this, and I remember talking to John about it, and we both were like, what about mahjong? And I was like, okay, listen. You don't know this about me, but I come from a mahjong family.
Oh, wow. So you're like, I know this.
So we all, this is gonna sound like shocking and weird, like to most Americans, but like Chinese families, you grow up gambling, like all that money you get for Chinese New Year, all that like hong bao money, like you gamble from the time you can count to 21. You're talking about like your 6-year-old kids, like we're all gambling for like real money.
Wow.
And their attitude is, the grown-ups attitude is, yes, you should be gambling for real money, because if you're not really playing the game. And it's same with mahjong, where my mother first taught us, you play with real money, even though the stakes are small.
Yeah.
There have to be stakes. You have to have skin in the game.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
her
yeah.
attitude was, everybody's attitude was like, you pay to learn mahjong, A, and B, if you don't have money in it, you're not really learning and you're
Right.
not really playing
There's no
correctly.
pressure. Yeah.
There's no
that
pressure.
makes sense. That actually does make sense. Yeah.
And it's one of those games where, it's not like Jinrami, where you can sort of like learn it in a couple of days and then people think like, oh, you play the game.
Yeah.
Mahjong, there's this whole thing in the way people shuffle the cards, they stack them, they move them. You can tell by the way somebody moves, how long they've been playing it. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yes, because you're shuffling, nobody's going like, okay, your turn. Okay. It's like this, unspoken ballet that just happens. They're just moving. They're looking at their cards. They're paying attention to the cards, and they're just clacking and doing it. And so, by Rachel playing this game with Eleanor, and again, this is stuff most people aren't gonna get,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
for me, a lot of it was a love letter to my family
Your
and
tradition.
my culture.
Yeah, I love
that
it.
what she's showing is like, you think I'm this outsider who doesn't get it, and I am showing you,
I totally get it.
that I've grown up
That's
with
so
this.
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I got it from, the scene was so well done that even people who don't play Mahjong, they would see that she was strategizing and she's winning, right? But I had no idea it was the subtleties of that.
It was that we got into talking to it, and a lot of credit goes to John and our and our editor Myron Kirstein, who's amazing, and also the Mahjong consultant, who was there on set.
Okay.
And I think I'd left Malaysia by that time. And, when I wrote it, it was the big thing. And the traditional climax in a romantic comedy in America is the heroine or the hero basically telling everyone to, go F themselves, and then they ride off in the sunset. And that's not the story that we were telling, that her victory had to look and feel different, that she had the option of winning but chose not to, because there is a higher calling and a higher purpose for her.
Right.
That there are things that are more important that she has respect for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the important thing was at the end of it that she had a card that she was calling. Calling just means that you need one card to win.
Yeah.
And that she has the option of winning, and that she chooses instead to give it up because she knows that's also the same card that Eleanor is calling. And then the card becomes like a metaphor for Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was beautifully done. So that's a perfect example of you bringing something to the table in the writing of this movie that another person would not have been able to do had they not been familiar with the culture and lived it.
I would agree with that. And again, this is not to take away from to take away from anyone else. I think the same way, we talk about authenticity in so many amazing, shows that are out there right now.
Yeah.
Even in small things, even in small ways where aunties, and cousins, give each other shit. Like, I feel like the audience can instinctively tell if it comes from a real place or not, and that's a hard thing to do if you haven't lived it or you haven't been in it.
Completely. And I throughout the movie, because I had lived in Singapore for 6 years, there were little things I was like, wow, that's so real. I felt like I was back in Singapore listening and hearing these conversations, and it's an interesting place. It's a very
Yeah.
unique culture and a unique place. So I thought the movie really captured, what Singapore is like now.
Oh, that's so great to hear.
Past, present, future, all
Yeah.
of that combined, So no, so Crazy Rich Asians, obviously, for a lot of us, things had been changing in Hollywood, where there was more diversity happening, after Oscars So White, all of that. So people were really starting to pay more attention. And then Crazy Rich Asians really did sort of open up the door, right?
Yes,
it did
I think so.
because obviously it did financially super well at the box office. And then it introduced mainstream moviegoers to the fact that, you know what? Doesn't matter if it's an all Asian cast as long as it's a good story and it's really entertaining.
I think it's exactly that. I remember going into a movie theater like with John early on and us looking at each other going like, oh my God, can you believe it? Because prior to that, I joke about it, but people would keep saying like, oh, you're so lucky. You got a chance to write this movie and it's about your home culture. Don't you feel amazing? And like, no, I didn't feel amazing about that. I felt stressed as hell. I would go to bed thinking like, just don't shit the bed on this. Like they're not going to give us another movie for 25 years.
Were you afraid it was going to fail?
Not afraid that it was going to fail, but we just didn't know. There hadn't been another test balloon. So it was the feeling of like, we knew we had something special.
Yeah.
We knew it was a story we wanted to tell and, that we on set felt it and we're so excited for it.
Right.
And, but you don't know.
Tremendous pressure.
You have no idea how people are going to see it. And I think that the biggest victory, at least for me, wasn't the box office, although that's a big part of it, but was that it showed the establishment that what they had told us for decades, that Americans just don't care about other people, is completely untrue.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
And every time, and I've seen it in television before where, these shows come out and people think, oh, it's not going to work because it doesn't follow the traditional format of successful shows. And those always end up being the sneak hits because the American audience is always so much more sophisticated and thoughtful and compassionate than the industry gives them credit for.
I know. That's what always surprises me to this day about Hollywood is that they really underestimate the audience oftentimes, right?
Oftentimes.
And these are the people who are making the decisions and you're like, come on, guys, really?
Yeah. And, but I will say at least with this project, to the credit of the industry, that we had, I think everybody was interested in the project. I think everybody felt like the time had come, but then the movie doing well, I felt like, sort of like proved out the premise. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, no, but it did come at a pretty good time.
Yes.
And I think people were ready for that shift and they were more open to the idea of a movie like this. That's why Black Panther is another example for the African-American community. That represented, a different kind of, change that was taking place as well.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought up Black Panther too, because when you talk about we're all in this together,
Yes.
I think, when you're a woman in this industry or you're LGBTQ or you're a minority or, you are so aware of, that the acceptance of another person's story is good for all of us.
Yes.
So that when Black Panther came out, my friends and I went out in huge groups on opening weekend because, it was this feeling of even before we, the buzz of the movie was already great, but we would have shown up anyway because it was this feeling of, we want to be supportive of all our stories being told. Yeah,
exactly. And it went both ways too for Crazy Rich Asians. Other groups came out in support of the movie, which was fantastic. So
I think the most touching parts of that was, again, people, from the African-American community, from the Latino community coming up saying, that there was so much in our story that culturally that was so similar to theirs and that they hadn't seen that in a major Hollywood release before.
Right.
So that was really special.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. I saw it a couple of times because I just thought, and I told everyone to go see it. Every person, no matter what color, background, they were, they all loved it because it was a universal story that everyone can relate to. And ultimately, that's what you want to do as a writer.
Yes.
You want to write something that everybody can connect to.
Yes.
Regardless of their background.
That's exactly it. And I think, the specificity of point of view it is very important because we have an audience that has read a ton of stories, that have seen a ton of stories. And so the more specific you can get with a culture, the more intriguing it is really to the larger culture, as long as what is driving the story at its core is something universal and human that we can latch on to.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the flip side of the aftermath of Crazy Rich Asians. I know. We got to get to this juicy part, which is that then you were asked to help with the sequel because it's a trilogy, right? We know that in the books, right? So the next book is China Rich Girlfriend, right?
Yes.
Is that what's called? Yeah, I've read all three.
Yes.
So you were asked to help write that movie.
Yes.
But then you found out that you were being paid 1/8 of what your co-writer, Peter Chiarelli, was going to be making. And no offense against Peter, but he's a white dude. And you're an Asian female writer on this movie. And okay, Mom, hang on. Mom, I'm going to apologize because my mom, my 83-year-old Korean mother, she listens to my podcast. It's really cute. She loves it. But Mom, I'm going to apologize because I'm a respectful daughter. So just like block your ears just for a second. Okay, what the fuck? Seriously. What? 1/8?
That was that was my reaction to it.
Yeah, hello. Okay, so you were being offered $110,000 and Peter was being offered like 800 to $1 million?
Well,
something like that?
Just to set it all up. First of all, Peter's a lovely, wonderful guy.
I'm sure he
incredibly respectful, and and really was a compatriot. In this part of the process, and my issue is not at all with him. It's really more on the industry and the system in place. And my attitude was, what the industry will say is that feature writers get their quotes up because they've been writing all those years, getting their quotes up. To where Peter's was and where a career feature writer would be.
Right.
And my attitude was, yes, but I am not some USC grad who just fell off the turnip truck. I've been the reason you got the movie you did, and the scenes worked
is because of your contribution.
And I know what I contributed to the movie. Is because of all the years I've spent honing my craft and really getting very good at what I do.
Yeah.
And again, it's weird for me to talk about this because again, culturally, a lot of things and particularly for women, whenever you come out and say I'm good at my job, there are like a lot of people, in the back of the minds going like, are you?
Yeah,
are you though?
Exactly.
And I know exactly what I bring to the table. Mm-hmm. And so their attitude was, well, you haven't been working as a feature writer, therefore we're going to offer you like a newbie, a newbie quote. Again, the details are just, they're tedious.
I know. I read actually a very detailed Forbes article about sort of the numbers side of it, which I thought they did a really good analysis.
Yes,
where it doesn't make it doesn't make sense. If you should value what the person has done for the initial project,
100%,
and then use that towards whatever the next payment should be.
Right. I had a couple of issues with their argument. First of all, that. I, as an Asian female, first of all, would never have been given those opportunities over the last 16 years to write for various movies.
Exactly.
Because, the way it works in Hollywood is, white men are considered, the gold standard, and they are approached to and are the first choice to write stories for all of us. Like, if there's a movie about like a bunch of, young females, and their friendship, it's not surprising to have a
white guy to write about it.
It's not surprising if you have like
that makes a lot of
male
sense.
writers, male directors, all of that, but you don't ever get the inverse. You're not going to get like, two young Asian female immigrants writing,
writing about a bunch of Wall Street guys
definitive movie about the New England Patriots. It would never happen that way.
You're so right.
So the opportunities in television were just, there were just more opportunities in TV. The landscape at that point is just much more diverse.
Yeah.
And, there really weren't those opportunities in features, A. Mm-hmm. And B, that TV in this day and age, for anyone to think that storytelling in television is in any way second place to features is ridiculous. I think we've been living in the golden decade of television.
For sure.
And so I feel like every time Business Affairs gives you that argument, it really never works to your advantage. It's always to theirs. And also, at this point, having worked in the industry as long as I have, there are concessions made for other people. That, when somebody else comes up with, proves themselves by coming up with a successful project, then,
there's always, you can always make concessions. You can
always make concessions. Yeah. You can always negotiate. And I just remember thinking, it was a hard decision. It's not something I came to easily.
And the decision being that you walked.
To walk.
You were
Yes.
like, I can't do this.
Yes. Even, and again, Pete, who has been like a class act through this, offering to, split his salary with me. But again, what it would have ended up being is a lot of sort of like backdoor weird wheedling of, on paper, she's not worth that much, but in reality, she'll get the money that she wants anyway. And I really felt...
No, you wanted it to be legit.
I wanted it to be legitimate, that what my
You didn't want some white guy giving you a handout.
I'm not looking for a handout. I'm not looking for someone to do me a favor. I'm looking for the industry to take a good hard look at itself.
Exactly.
And, and fix itself.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm not under any illusion that it's going to happen, but I felt that a lot of feature...
Adele, you made some waves by doing this. I'm going to read this quote from Forbes. It was entitled, "Here's What We Learned from Watching Adele Lim Walk Away from the Pay Gap." And I love this. "Imagine being part of a groundbreaking project where your contribution helped create hundreds of millions of dollars. Imagine as well that this success smashed all previous records. How would you react if executives invited you back for the sequel and you found out your offer was 1/8 of what your teammates were being paid? Would you stick around?" No. Obviously.
No.
Yeah. So, a lot of people were saying this was such a courageous move on your part. You made a statement and you stood ground, you stood up for yourself. And I agree with all of that, but for you, what did it feel like?
Well, it's very nice and generous of you to think so. I think it's less courageous only in that I knew I could go back to television. Okay. I knew that I could find other job opportunities. And I think the issue was for a lot of feature writers, particularly if you're female, particularly if you're a woman of color, you don't have that option.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that option, it's not that you're choosing to not be courageous. It's that you're choosing to continue having a livelihood.
Yeah.
And I just felt fortunate that I was in a position where I could walk away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, unfortunately, jobs still are kind of scarce for female, writers, screenwriters particularly. Because, statistically, it says, okay, I've looked up this report, which I found fascinating. Women account for 51% of moviegoers, right? Mm-hmm. But on the top 100 grossing films of 2019, women represented 12% of directors, 20% of writers. It's like, I was even surprised it was that high.
It's 20% of writers, but of the 100 top grossing films, I think the year Crazy Rich came out, maybe 15% were not written by like white guys. Like it's
so low when it comes to female representation.
It is so low. Yeah. So for your listeners out there, I think if you're a person of color or you're female, and you want to get into entertainment, I highly support your efforts, because it's this. I brought it up earlier. There isn't this secret cabal in Hollywood, at least I don't think so, choosing to exclude people's stories. But the kind of stories we tell are stories that resonate personally to us. So if I am a white guy director and there's just going to be a story out there that I connect with, it's probably going to feature a heroic, historic white guy, whether it's a sports figure, a historical figure. Mm-hmm. Same with the writers that you pick then, and it goes up and down the line. And so when you don't have content,
you can't break into that.
It's very
difficult to break into that.
And so if you don't have content creators, directors, writers, executives who can connect with stories,
right,
then you're not going to have those stories told. They're not going to be out there. They're not going to win awards.
Right.
When you talk about, you brought up Oscars So White, a big part of it, again, having worked with a lot of people a lot of white men in the industry who I love and, who are amazing guys, they're like us. They're no different from us, that we are drawn to stories that we connect with.
Right.
But because we grew up, for at least in this country, as outsiders, that we are forced to be a lot more open to other people's stories where they never had to.
They don't have to be. Yeah,
They
exactly.
don't have to.
Yeah.
They are, and they view sometimes your story as the other story.
Right.
And then it becomes this cycle where the media perpetuates this idea that we are other and people don't care about our stories, when in fact we've shown that they do.
So exactly, because the less exposed you are, then how are they supposed? You kind of can't blame the audience, because if they're not being exposed, then how are they even going to know that they want it?
100%.
That it exists.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. And when you look, I've there's this TV show I've been really into called Drunk History.
Okay.
And in going through that, weirdly, you find all these amazing historical American narratives of great women women, you know, like Lucky Daisy, and you're wondering like, why has no one, done a huge Hollywood movie about this person? And and you realize again, it's sometimes it's the bean counters, but a lot of times it's a passionate storyteller saying like, I connect with this story. And if you don't have women in that role, you're not going to get the female perspective. You're not going to get a minority perspective.
Yeah.
And somehow then we end up getting completely erased from the history of this country, from the landscape of this country.
Yeah. At least sideline for sure.
Sideline for sure. And when people talk about their personal heroes in this country, it's I would just say that as a mother, it affects our representation when we don't tell our stories, even in fiction.
Oh yeah.
It affects how the rest of the country views you as a race, as a culture.
Listen, I grew up, Korean American. I was born here in the States. We moved back to Korea when I was very young for a couple of years, but coming back the rest of my life here. And not seeing anybody who looked like me on television or in movies. And then I grew up in Ohio, which was very white. That does, affect you in terms of like, wow, I don't know where I belong. And, so I guess I don't deserve any kind of representation or recognition. So you get programmed that way.
Right. Of feeling. And again, it's something I wasn't completely sensitive or aware of,
because you were in Malaysia
as an immigrant, but really realizing that for my brothers and sisters who grew up over here, that they did have a very different experience, of not expecting to have a seat at the table.
Right.
And again, the issue with retention for Asian American writers in writers' rooms was a huge problem, that we would get all these amazing writers, highly qualified from great schools. And again, not that it's all about your schools, but, it always felt like they had something extra to prove. But the attitude was that they would perform and underrepresent because, culturally you don't want to talk about yourself or boast about yourself.
Right.
And you hope that your work speaks for itself. And unfortunately, that's not how Hollywood works.
No, you know what? You have to beat your own damn drum.
Yep.
And you have to be very vocal about it.
And you have to be confident, and you have to show up at the table demanding a seat at it, or expecting to have a seat at it.
So, I mean, Adele, the move that you made by walking, I mean, okay, you're saying it wasn't courageous. It was, in my mind. And to a lot of people, it was. Do you think it made a difference? I'm sure you heard from a lot of people after you did this.
That was a gratifying thing about it. First of all, that so many people reached out saying that they were going through the exact same thing, whether they were in the industry or outside of the industry.
Okay.
And again, to not take credit for it, but in some small part, like reading about what I went through made them feel more courageous, or made them feel like they could demand, the extra bit that their manager or their agent said that, let's not push for that. And they really sort of dug their heels in and said, no, I deserve this. And again, it's not specific to our industry.
Right. Oh yeah. No, my industry too. In news. And I know that my male counterparts were making much more than I was.
And again, it all comes back to us then, having to sort of justify us taking up any space, of working against that perception that, again, a lot of guys I work with, they have it in the back of their heads of like, oh, well, maybe she didn't contribute that much. Maybe she's only there because, she's a woman and she's a different color and they just had to do it. And so it's fair that she gets paid less. I'm like,
bullshit.
Bitch, no. I worked real hard to get where I am. I didn't get my job simply by virtue of being like a female Asian. I didn't get to where I was because of my race.
That's what's so good. Adele, you stood up for yourself. You stood up for who you are and the experience that you have, and you made a really, really strong point, obviously, that reverberated throughout the industry and, obviously extended outside the industry. So, I mean, that's a huge legacy. That alone, honestly, it really is.
No, thanks. I think that it took a long time for me to come forward with it, and I really didn't until Rebecca Sun at the Hollywood Reporter. She'd known about it for a while.
Yes.
And I didn't want to come out with it in the beginning because I didn't want to detract, and I still don't. I don't want to detract from the goodwill and the wonderful feeling that we have for the movie. I just wanted to, whatever my personal issues are, that they are something aside from the movie and the impact that it made.
Right. What do you think is going to happen then with the sequel?
They'll go forward with it. It'll be,
Do you think it's going to have that authentic voice?
What I would hope so. I would hope that. And here's the thing: I love everybody on that movie.
Yeah.
John, the directors, the actors. Sorry, not the. Yeah, all
John
the actors.
was the director, all the actors. Yeah, I mean, amazing cast.
All
Yeah.
of them, and I'm personal friends with them. I want this. I want the sequels to do well. I 100% do.
I think we all do.
Yes.
Here's the thing, Adele. I say this to people all the time. People of color, we kind of get one shot, right? And I think that's why we feel even more pressure to succeed, in an industry that's mostly white,
Yeah.
And so for us, we feel this tremendous pressure because we got one shot. And if we don't succeed, we're not going to get a second shot.
That's because that's true.
Yes,
Because-
right. And sadly, it's true.
Sadly, it's true. And again, this is not about race wars. It's not about us versus white people. And again, all the people who gave me my breaks in my career, were white showrunners.
Yeah.
And they are our compatriots, they are our allies in this. But there's a lot of implicit bias, particularly in something as subjective as entertainment.
Yeah.
Where, you can say, oh, well, she doesn't get it. But in the mind of a showrunner or mind of a director or an executive, oh, she doesn't get it. Why doesn't she get it? Does she not get it because she's a she or she's a different race? She's never going to get it.
Yeah.
And the same way that, somebody who is a white guy who doesn't get it right off the bat, they're like, oh, well, it just wasn't his day.
Right.
And they're just given more opportunities to fail. Whereas,
Definitely.
it feels like for us that there really isn't that same latitude.
No. And that's the thing. So that's why I want the sequel to succeed too,
I do.
because I'm afraid that if it doesn't and it fails, people are like, see, it was a flash in the pan.
Right. And we're not. And so I want them to do spectacularly well. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully.
Yes.
Because the trilogy is great. I've read all 3 books. I think
So much
they're
fun.
so fun. They're so fun. All right. So let's talk about the changes that are still taking place in Hollywood. Let's talk about Parasite.
Oh my
Did you
goodness.
lose your mind?
Lost
Your mind.
I lost my mind. So
Yeah.
I was at home. I was working. I was on deadline. I was barely paying attention to the Oscars. It was kind of on in the background. And then Parasite, I started having
kept
win
winning.
after win after win after win. I had a party to go to after that. I wasn't going to go because, and then Parasite won and my phone blew up. And I remember thinking, if Parasite can win Best Picture, I can put on a dress, get out there, and just celebrate with the rest of the world.
you.
It was
Good.
the best time.
Again, another game changer. Just like Crazy Rich Asians was, it kind of showed again the mainstream and industry, people in the industry, the decision makers that listen. If it's a good story,
Yes.
it doesn't matter where it comes from.
It doesn't matter where it
You
comes
got to
from.
give these projects and these stories a chance.
Because at the end of the day, we're all human and we all bleed and
Yeah.
cry and laugh and,
And we all have a twisted side,
we
like
all
in
have a
Parasite.
twisted side. And in Parasite, again, because it just transcended everything. I remember watching
did.
it, it does everything a great movie should do, which is like it makes you laugh, it makes you cry. But, more importantly, you walk out of the theater with this feeling that haunts you for days,
Yes.
thinking, who am I in the allegory of that movie? And I
Yeah.
remember thinking like, oh my God, am I the bitch
I
playing
know
cello
exactly.
at the garden party? Is that
Exactly.
who I am in the grand structure of things? But it makes you think deeply about it. And so he could, he transcended, and that's what I want for all of us.
I know. That was definitely a moment that I think will reverberate and really have an impact. So that gives me hope that incrementally,
Yeah.
the Asian American stories, they're starting to really, kind of be adopted and embraced, and people are becoming more curious,
Yes,
and
and-
interested.
Yes, but like you said, we have to keep fighting for it. And
Absolutely.
I think the lesson of Joy Luck Club, I don't think has been lost on anybody, because when that came out and was a huge success,
Yep.
the thought was it was going to change the landscape for Asian American stories and actors, and it really didn't.
didn't. Yeah.
And it really takes, it's not about one great movie or 2 great movies.
Right.
It is about all of us being relentless in pushing our stories forward,
Yep.
and not leading with, oh, it's about diversity and inclusion. I don't sit down and write a story and think this is for diversity and inclusion. I'm
Right,
like,
right.
no, I'm writing a story because it's a fucking kick-ass story that I want to share with the
and
world.
that's the way it should be.
I'm sorry for swearing a lot on
No,
your
no, it's
podcast.
okay,
That's the
Mom.
other thing.
Sorry, Mom.
I know. I have children. I thought all this would
No,
just
but you
switch
know
off,
what?
but
Okay,
it
here's the
doesn't.
confession to everyone. I mean, people who know me, they know this. I drop the F-bomb a God. It's bad. It's bad. So the fact that I'm controlling myself on this podcast, the fact that I said it
I'm
once,
very impressed.
I would have said it like 100 times
You're a
already.
class act lady.
Yeah, thank you. You know, there was a study that recently came out that said that if you swear, it means you're really smart.
Oh, I must be a genius.
I'm like above Mensa.
No, I think it's also one of those bad habits I picked up in the writer's room early on. And now,
I would imagine in the writer's room. Yeah.
Now I think I would have problems like going back into a writer's room, because when I left TV, that was really sort of when everything sort of broke out. And in my early years, because I've been in those discussions with the other white guy writers, where I think sometimes they forget I'm a woman, or they forget I'm a minority, but they'll talk about, hiring a script coordinator or somebody else, and thinking like, oh, well, should we hire this African-American script coordinator because, the jokes we tell? And I'm like, guys,
hello.
Guys,
You're
are
like,
you
hello.
listening to yourself?
Oh, man.
Wow. Because it's this feeling that, they can't be themselves around you. And so the defense mechanism, and I think a lot of women, adopted early on, was just to be the nastiest voice in the room, just to dish it back as hard, so that you are not
they would
viewed,
be like, okay,
yeah,
you're
it's
cool.
just like, okay, she can hang.
Got it.
But again, that's not a great way to be. Like, you don't, you did it. And again, because, because I'm Asian, whatever, you get thrown a lot of weird Asian-y, completely inappropriate jokes.
Yes,
and I think everything is changing now, but it happened in the beginning. And so you don't want to be weirdly boxed in the corner as some sort of victim. You've got to start like dishing it back to everybody.
Right. That's true.
And so I feel
newsrooms too. Same in my business for sure.
And so, you become this creature that you're like, okay, now I can stand on my own and be regarded a certain way, but
and now I have a total potty mouth.
And
I
now,
swear like a sailor.
And now I'm like not great at parent-teacher conferences. And now
that takes control.
Yeah.
I'm sure that takes control. I was going to play on the parasite subject. I was going to play a clip of what Donald Trump said at a rally recently, and where he was, saying, why did they win? And But I'm not going to play it because I don't want to give him airtime. But it is still a battle. It shows that, even though that this is a huge victory, we still have this battle like you're talking about. We still have the fight to fight. And I always say, even though this is a movement, I don't think it's a moment, it's a movement. And the movement needs to be sustained.
Yes.
That's the key.
Yes, the movement needs to be sustained. We need more stories coming in. We need, not just one movie a year. We just need nonstop movies. We need successes, and we need failures. We need it to be okay for us to come up with a movie that doesn't do well.
That's a good point.
And for the industry to not say like, well, Asian movies don't work.
You know what? That's a good point.
If we based like white movies on the success of Ad Astra, that would be ridiculous. So anyway, I just want us to be coming up with all kinds of content, things that are, Oscar worthy, things that are not Oscar worthy.
Yeah, but I mean, the influx of content that is coming out is terrific, right? I mean, The Farewell was amazing, Lulu Wang's movie, and Awkwafina is blowing up, obviously. Always Be My Maybe.
Yes.
That was on Netflix. Love that movie. Yep. So again, I'm seeing this change where these stories are universal. Again, it's not the stereotypical Asian role, right? And people are really responding.
They really are responding. And I think it all has to do with your work. It's again, people aren't going to go watch your movie because they believe in diversity. I mean, if they do, great, awesome. Please go with that instinct.
That's a bonus.
That's a bonus. But generally, they're going because they feel like you're going to tell them a story that's going to make them feel good, that's going to make them feel at all, that they're going to be drawn to for whatever reason. You know, that's what they're showing up for. And just the tiniest side note on, since you brought up the Donald Trump thing, which is,
and I see you're wearing a Warren pin.
I am wearing
for Elizabeth.
a Warren pin. Which is, I think like he has opinions on Parasite or not? No, but what he's doing is he's basically baiting a larger audience and making it feel like there is a race war when there isn't.
It's a culture war he's creating.
It's a culture war he's creating. It's not us versus white people. We are all in this together. I was raised on amazing movies and American television, and it is the greatest export this country has. I truly believe that. And so, it's about celebrating all our stories. It is not about taking from one person, taking from one of us to give to the other.
Right.
Yeah. It's good for all of us.
But when he said bring back Gone with the Wind, I'm like, seriously, dude, great movie, but really? That's the one movie that you can mention.
Yeah.
From what, 1940 freaking 50s or whatever, whenever it was made.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, yeah, we won't spend any more time on him. Okay, so you have been working on a Disney animated film, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, and then tell me what you're working on, coming up.
Sure. I can't get too much into the Disney movie, although I'm very excited about it. So I can only speak to really what they've put out, which is, it's called Riya and the Last Dragon.
Okay.
And it was right off of when I came off of Crazy Rich. Osnat Shura, the producer on it, who was also the producer of Moana.
I love that movie.
Again, Disney is magic because of the care and the painstaking, effort they take to really try and get things right and to tell stories that come from the heart and that are resonant and, last for generations. And I went in to meet with Disney, and it takes a long time to make an animated movie. It takes them between 5 and 10 years. And I had no
Does it really?
It does, because
holy moly,
that's how hard it is.
Oh God. Okay.
And so I wasn't with this movie for the whole run, but I came into it. They have all these screenings, which are these what the storyboard artists put together, so you can see roughly the whole thing of the movie. I came on just before their first screening, and I've been with it ever since. And when she pitched it to me, it was all the amazing things I'd loved, which is, like strong female protagonists. When you talked about not seeing a lot of yourself on screen, again, growing up in Asia, it's different. I grew up watching, all these Hong Kong action movies where even like the helpless girl in distress turns out to be like a kung fu martial artist, totally. And we had Michelle Yeoh, we had all these amazing female heroes
who could kick anyone's ass.
Who could kick anyone's ass, like even like these like Shaolin nuns, again,
love it.
Just like laying waste to people. And that's something that young American women didn't have growing up. And that's why I felt like Wonder Woman landed the way it did.
Yes.
And so, when Osnat told me about the project, again, strong female protagonist, and it had a dragon element too. I'm like, those are all my happy favorite things. And I know, there's also a thing with Asian Americans in the community here feeling like we don't want all our stories to be about kung fu and I, of course, 100%, but genuinely speaking, like that was just where I grew up, and that was a happy place of mine, and it's always been something I wanted to do.
Is this movie has an Asian theme to it?
Yes, so it's set in a fantasy world, but it's inspired by the cultures of Southeast Asia.
Ah, got it. Oh my gosh, how fun! And when is it coming out then?
It's coming out in November of this year.
November of this year.
Yes,
oh, awesome!
Yes. So the animators are busy cranking things out, and I want to say that the team I work with in Disney, again, the most amazing, wonderful group of people, like so talented.
I mean, it is Disney.
It is Disney.
So being part of Disney, is that a thrill for you?
It really, it sounds so corny. It really is. And
it has to be.
And I'm such a cynical, jaded person, but my grandmother in Malaysia, the first movie I ever watched was Snow White. And she was an entrepreneur, and she would have these annual gatherings of all her dealers who sold the products. And because she's a sort of nurturing teacher at heart, she'd have all these, she'd have this musical performance. And she put on Snow White, and I'm, nepotism. I was her granddaughter, so I got to play Snow White. And all my nieces and all my cousins were,
dwarves,
all the little animals, the dwarves. And, we'd whistle while you work, and you would wash the dishes using the products from my grandmother's company,
my God, that's hilarious.
So, Disney, if you're listening to this, don't come after us for licensing.
That's so it was meant to be that you eventually worked on a Disney film.
Yes. And I think, weirdly, like being a mom is also part of it. I have two young children who
How old are they?
7 and 10 right now.
Okay.
And they've never been able to watch anything I've worked on. And my girl is also, she's not a girly girl. So even Crazy Rich, she didn't watch until months and months and months later because she heard there was kissing in it. And she didn't want to watch anything with kissing. And just knowing what excites them and feeling like, this is what this is exactly the kind of movie I will want my children watching.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, you must be incredibly proud of that
I'm
project.
so proud of it. I'm so excited. Cannot wait to share it with the world.
I can't wait to see it either. So Adele Lim joins me now because, like I told you guys before, we really wanted to update this interview that had been done pre-COVID. And I really wanted to get her take on what's going on and just, get an update from her in general. So Adele, hey, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me in these strange times.
No kidding, Adele. So let me ask you first, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. All things considered, I think we need to count our blessings. I'm at home. I'm not worried about cash. My kids are with me.
Yeah.
The only issue is like having to take care of two kids, 7 and 10, while being on deadline. So just to give you a heads up, the kids have been warned, but at some point there might be some like 7-year-old in here. Just to, got to keep it real.
Well, you know what? That's happening a lot these days because everyone's working from home, right? So you have like kids running around, you have dogs running around. So that's okay. No problem. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was wondering because I know that you have two small children and you're still trying to work. So has that been okay for you? Or, I mean, that must be a major adjustment.
It is a very big adjustment. I think, whether I'm a TV writer or a feature writer, I'm usually incredibly busy on a day-to-day level. I'm out of the house, 12 hours a day sometimes. I've had a nanny for 10 years. And you really need that, even if you can work from home, because you just need to have the headspace to be able to get into your work.
Right.
The difficulty, and I have touch with really great kids. They can go, settle in with their schoolwork for a while, but still you have to set up a Zoom. You have to get lunch. You have to, there's laundry, there's cleaning. And I've washed a million, dishes. All these things happen. It takes you out. So you need to find a new and different way to work. And I think, especially in the beginning, and I think especially with working mothers, women generally do much more of the work. I'm divorced. And so thankfully, we've been able to split time a little bit more. But the idea that you're going to be completely on top of all your work, plus, supervising homeschooling for your kids and running your house and cooking and cleaning and doing everything else, it is crazy.
No, it's crazy. I can't even imagine. I don't have kids. I only have two dogs, so I can't imagine. And the joke is now that people are finally appreciating how much work teachers put in to teaching at school. I mean, I think somebody said they think that teachers should be paid $1 billion.
Give them all the monies in the world. They deserve it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so tell me, Adele, let's move to your work. I mean, when we did the interview before, you were super busy. You were working on multiple projects. And so I'm wondering how things have shifted or maybe not for you and sort of the tone of what's going on in Hollywood, just because we all know productions have been shut down. People are staying home, nothing's happening. So that's a huge jolt to the industry.
It is a huge jolt to the industry. And the difficulty is we really don't know how to plan for it because we don't know things are going to be opening up. And even if, right now we have states that are opening up, but even if a place says, oh, you can come and shoot here, it's going to be difficult to get insurance on your production.
Right.
So in the position we're in, it talked a little bit about a feature we had sold to Lionsgate and that we were, in just preliminary, it hasn't been greenlit. We were in preliminary talks for scheduling. Ideally, I would have been in Vancouver right now prepping movie, but now, we don't know when things are going to open up. But the one thing the industry can do, and I think, it's a blessing that I'm a writer and it's good for a lot of the writers out there. The one thing the industry can do is really sort of stockpile a lot of scripts and development can continue. So
that's true. That's true.
Yep. So, that is still moving on. Writers are still writing. We're still planning, and just to be ready for when, when the world opens up, us being able to pivot and be prepared for that. In terms of my work, I think I've scaled back a lot too. I think prior to this, me and, a lot of my busy industry pals, we're just we're on, go, nonstop. Take it all down. And I think the humbling and, the self-compassionate thing to do right now is to sort of feel like, what can I handle? Because, even if you didn't have kids and you're at home, that especially when all this first broke out, everybody's in a crazy headspace.
Oh, totally.
What's the future going to hold? How am I dealing with this? And, and the script I'm working on right now is a comedy. So it's hard to come up with dick jokes when they're down around you. Who can think?
Right.
And and then there's also the scale of, I had a couple of other projects I could have jumped on, but or I was in the process of jumping on and decided to take a step back because, there's just too much on your plate. And usually I'm the kind of person who says like, no, just put it all on and I'll figure it out. I can do anything. But I think we all have to realize now we're working, we don't have the village of support we can count on now. So we can just take on what we can.
Yeah. And I think this is also teaching us a lesson of stopping, right? Because we've been forced to stop. We have no choice in the matter, right? I mean, the entire world has stopped at the same time. And so therefore it's like, what else could make people like us, like type A, go getters, constantly going, what else would make us stop like this and really just sit and think and reflect and self-care, all of that stuff? I mean, it's pretty amazing if you think about it.
Girl, it took a global pandemic is what it took. So, just on a side note, this has less to do with the industry and our community, but as you said, I'm absolutely that person who was like, oh, kids aren't going to slow me down. I'm just going to keep pushing. And I think that's the way most of us are wired. And having some time at home just to be a person, be a woman, be a mother, be a caretaker, and just be in the moment has been eye-opening.
Yeah.
And I think it is absolutely going to have an effect on our industry when it opens up, because the demands we put on people in the industry is insane. The number of hours we put in, whatever project you're on, it's expected to be, the air you live and you breathe, and it's the end all be all. And I don't know if that's a healthy thing.
But do you think, Adele, that it will actually have a lasting impact in Hollywood? Just because, again, the dark side of Hollywood is that people will just go right back into it and just, do the Hollywood thing and nothing will have changed. But do you think that people will actually look at things differently for the long term?
I'm not clairvoyant, but I think with the number of people we've had, being forced to stay home and forced to do things differently, it's opened our eyes to seeing how things can be done differently, that we don't need to be killing ourselves or be locked in a room for 10 hours a day with other writers to make TV happen.
Right.
And I think the other thing to look at realistically, besides, us wanting to have a touchy-feely moment of being better human beings, is the reality of production. If we're looking at a future where we don't have a vaccine yet, and we're asking people to work on these productions, a set is created to be a virus vector, honestly. For anyone who's spent any time on set, you are up in each other's grills nonstop in small enclosed spaces. As an actor, you're in a trailer with hair and makeup. Yep. When you're on set, last looks, touch-ups, there's someone touching your face constantly.
You know what? I didn't even think of that part. You're so right. Yeah.
So just, the way we think about and approach the business might change. And there's so many variables out there.
Right. Let's talk about sort of the downside of all of this, the crisis for the Asian and Asian American community. I've been talking about this for weeks on the show, actually before it sort of blew up, and because I saw this coming. And so, as you know, there's been a lot of racism and xenophobia against Asians and Asian Americans, and it's not getting any better. And when I thought of doing this update with you, I thought of you and what was going on in Hollywood before. And during our interview, we were on a high. We were on the highest of highs, right? We were talking about Parasite and how it had just swept the Oscars.
Oh my God, that seems like 3 years ago.
Can you imagine? That was only like a 2.5, barely 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, crash. Right? Because of the pandemic, and then the xenophobia started hitting.
Yes.
And so I had this fear, oh my God, all this progress that we had made. And literally it made my head spin when this started happening, the xenophobia. What are your thoughts on how this may or may not, I hope, impact the progress that we had made in Hollywood?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I have a couple of, I have a lot of thoughts on that. My first initial thought is like, fuck everybody. And, we're not going to let that happen, because we can't.
Yeah.
But speaking realistically, I can only speak from my own experience. I have a feature right now that we're working on that is, Asian centric, full Asian cast, but is a Hollywood movie and meant for an American audience, American mainstream audience. And when all this first started happening in terms of the disgusting, racist behavior you saw happening across the states that was being tolerated by our leaders, I had a very honest discussion with our producers saying, how's it going to sit with the studio and, releasing a movie that's basically about Asians in Asia in this climate. And to their credit, our producers and, and speaking for the studio too, their attitude was, first of all, when we eventually get out of this, the world is going to want a comedy. And a reason to laugh. And two, and again, my producers are white. The studio executives we're dealing with are, the majority of them are white, and they have been nothing but supportive.
Oh, great.
And I think we've seen that on a couple of other fronts too. Like they made I can't remember which studio it was that's doing Singles Day. That was written by Lillian Yu. Just got announced in the trades, but the attitude of that studio also was, they are going to, make a point of it, of saying that that's not going to slow us down. So that's the second point. And the third point I want to make about that is these racist acts, it's still important for us to put it in context, which is they are the acts of a very small minority.
Yeah.
I know in my heart, that that's not how the majority of Americans think. The issue is it's these small, hateful little incidents that get all the airplay.
Yep.
But, it's the attitude of the majority of Americans who are thoughtful, amazing, compassionate, intelligent people who know that, the blame for all this isn't on the shoulders of random Asians walking on the streets.
Right.
I believe that, that's not the America I know. And I think with all of us in the creative community, it's also really on us to take it head on and, to not be afraid. And that when that topic comes up or when that fear comes up, for us to address it head on.
Yeah.
Just understand that that's there. And, we all know that that's not the case. And I'm done with, just denying logic and science and, truth.
Oh, yeah,
and,
absolutely. Look, we have been struggling with this, for decades in terms of racism and trying to have a bigger voice. And we have reached a point where we are now being listened to and being taken seriously. And so we can't go backwards. I've been saying to my audience, listen, the time is now more than ever to speak up and really use your voice and your power, because we have arrived and we cannot let this kind of bullshit take us down again. And you're right. In terms of the entertainment space and media, especially Hollywood, because it has such a large platform to be able to make these statements, to be able to project these images, these positive images, I'm so glad to hear that the people you're working with and the word on the street is that, no, we're going to move forward. And that can be so powerful in terms of getting that message across. So I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh, 100%. And I'm glad that you're fighting the fight on your front and, making sure that, we're out there, we're all, we are all on message and that we are all in this together. And I think that the great thing, with Next Shark and Benny bringing such awareness to, these acts of racial violence against Asian Americans is that we really have come together even more so. Like we are looking out for each other and we understand that we need to be more vocal. And I think that these incidences are happening is, for a lot of these Americans to cast a blind eye on the history that Asian Americans have had in this country.
Exactly.
We are an integral part of the fabric of this country, and to be suddenly viewed as an other, to me, as somebody who works in the industry, it's a failing of the industry. That the reason a lot of people can still view us as outsiders is because we haven't been represented in the stories that they've been seeing on screen. So it's easy to say like, oh, they're the other, when really, we might have been here longer than your family has.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like, again, with the projects that we want to do, yes, we want to do it to be entertaining and to have a great time, but also, to really make a statement that we are here, we're Americans and, we get to tell our stories.
Yeah, I'm curious though, Adele, I wonder if in some interesting way that this could possibly actually catapult Hollywood to tell more stories, because they see the ugliness and the lack of representation and what that leads to. So therefore, maybe there will be more motivation to do more stories that are more, representing, these minority groups, including Asians, right?
Well, I will say this, which is like, I believe, people have good motivations, but Hollywood, like anything else, is a business.
Of course.
And so, I don't think, and again, this is not to detract from them, but they're not going to put out a movie because they feel like this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
They're going to do it because it's they
gonna
need
make
to
money.
believe it's going to. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if we put out an amazing TV show, an amazing movie that we feel is going to like hit a lot of people, that it's going to get a lot of people out and excited, you can't argue against the bottom line.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead. No, I was just going to
say, because you brought up Parasite and everything else, like, I feel like what the last few years have shown is that, our movies and our TV shows, are profitable and do generate a lot of interest.
Yeah.
So I feel like you can't take that away from us.
Well, look at the poster right behind your head, girl, that you are a very big part of. So
it sounds, you can't see it, like there's a big crazy rich poster behind me, which is so narcissistic. But again, all of this was before the world, it's like before the world where we just existed on Zooms and people could see inside your office.
I know, exactly. Now we have to be careful of what's behind us. Have you heard of this Twitter feed? It's called A Room with a View, or something like that, where somebody analyzes everyone's rooms behind them when they're doing interviews.
Oh my God.
They're like, oh, look at the book that they have behind them. So be careful. Just a warning.
Oh yeah. No.
Well, Adele, I'm so excited to see what you put out. And we've talked about this film that the concept and all of that, and that's going to be great, because you're right. We need to laugh once we're past this craziness, and we need to be entertained. And I think that is the job that you guys have, to be inspired that way and make this world more joyful. Yeah, right now it's not so much, but hopefully, you can crank it out.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say about that, in terms of content creators coming up with new stuff right now, the difficulty with that is that it's hard to imagine the world we're writing for.
Yeah.
So even if you come up with a scene that takes place in a sports arena or a concert, is this how the world is going to look at? Are we still going to have our concerts and bars, and are they all going to look the same? So even when I'm scripting it, I feel like I'm writing in a vacuum, and I'm not sure of the world where this is going to play.
That's such an interesting concept. You know why? Because when I watch TV now, on Netflix or something, I will actually notice, oh my God, that person just touched their face. Oh my God, they just coughed. Oh my God, they're having sex. It's you start thinking in that context of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's so interesting. So that may affect the way in which you write stories going forward.
Sure. And also people's, how much of like, how COVID aware are people going to be in our new world of saying like, again, are your friends take a fun trip? And, is that part of what they're talking about as well?
Right.
We'll see.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, Adele, before I bring this to a close?
No, I think that's it. Thanks. And by the way, thank you so much for keeping that narrative and the awareness of what's going on with our community out there. And I think your show is a great way for us to galvanize and really come together and be very aware of what's happening, in all our specific little sectors.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think it just goes to show that we all need to come together as a community, especially at a time of crisis. And I think this is definitely a galvanizing moment for our community. Just like it was in history at different events. If not now, then I don't know what else would bring us together as a community. So that's why I'm so appreciative for people like you who are willing to give me the time to talk about what's going on and give us a real update on life, during COVID, right? So, so thank you, Adele. And listen,
thank you so much.
Keep up the good work. Stay sane with the kids at home. And I look forward to seeing you face to face sometime in the hopefully near future.
Cannot wait.
I know. All right. Okay. Take care, Adele.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that was great talking to Adele now, given everything that's been happening and that's still going on. Gives me hope, though, that, in Hollywood, things are going to continue moving forward and that attitudes will not change in any way, or at least maybe in the best way, but also just the resilience that we all need to have, no matter what industry we're in, to try to move our cause forward, have our voices heard, and make a difference in a positive way. So I so appreciate that Adele gave me the time today, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode as well. Just take care of yourselves and stay informed. But also would love to hear from you, as always, via Instagram, Facebook. We also have a Gmail account, themayleshow@gmail.com. And it would be great if you guys could give us some reviews or ratings on iTunes or other podcast platforms, or the May Lee Show YouTube channel. So it's great when we get those great ratings and great reviews. Subscribe to the channel. All of that good stuff, because it just helps motivate us, inspire us to do more for you guys. So thank you for your support. Keep it up and take care of yourselves. Until next time.